Have you ever been so disarmed by someone's presence that your entire world tilted on its axis? That was me, the first night I stepped into Isabel Grant's cliffside mansion. The place itself was like something pulled from a fever dream vast. Walls of glass overlooking a furious ocean, marble floors polished so smooth they reflected the stormy sky above. A chandelier hung like a frozen cascade of light, and the air smelled faintly of salt and expensive perfume. I stood there, my bag slipping from my shoulder, feeling like a trespasser in someone else's universe, and then she appeared. Isabel Grant, billionaire, corporate predator, a woman whose very posture seemed to say the world belonged to her, and she was merely deciding who got to borrow it for the night. She crossed the room like gravity itself bent toward her. Dark silk draped over her frame, her storm gray eyes locking on mine. And then, in that low, deliberate voice, she said words that would unravel everything I thought I knew. "There's only one rule in my house, Julia. No clothes allowed." I laughed, nervously, waiting for the smirk, the hint of irony. But her face was unreadable. No joke, no softness. Just that rule. And in that moment, I knew whatever game I had stumbled into, I was already playing it. 2 weeks earlier, I was broke, exhausted, and hiding from reality in a cramped antique shop on Willow Street. The place was a maze of crooked shelves, towers of dusty books, and relics nobody wanted. The air carried the scent of cedar and history, and an old radio croaked out a jazz melody that scratched between notes. I wasn't looking to buy anything. Rent was already 3 months overdue, and the birdwatching tours I ran barely kept me fed. But I came here when the world pressed too hard. It felt safe, as though time itself had slowed to catch its breath. That's when I saw it. A Miles Davis vinyl, tucked into a crate, gleaming faintly beneath a coat of dust. Original press. My pulse kicked. I reached for it just as another hand brushed mine. Her hand, warm, deliberate. Nails immaculate, skin soft in a way mine had never been. I froze, then looked up. And there she was, tall, poised, silk blouse tucked into tailored trousers that screamed wealth. Her presence was a wall commanding, immovable. And those eyes, storm gray, sharpened on me like a challenge. "Rare find," she said, her voice smooth, controlled. "Do you even know Miles Davis, or are you just trying to look sophisticated?" My jaw clenched. Who did she think she was? "Do you know?" I shot back, "that Davis once recorded a track inspired by nightingales. I'm guessing you've never spent a dawn in the marshes listening to them?" Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite disdain. Touché. The vinyl hovered between us like a gauntlet. The shopkeeper, amused by our silent tug-of-war, chuckled. "Why don't you two settle it over coffee?" Before I could protest, she tilted her head, that challenging glint still in her eyes. "Well, unless, of course, you're afraid you'll bore me with sparrow talk." I should have said no, walked away. But something about her tone half-dare, half-invitation drew me in. Minutes later, we were in a small cafe at the corner. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapped around us, the hum of soft conversation filling the air. She ordered black coffee like she was issuing a directive. I ordered a latte, trying to mask my guilt over spending money I didn't have. We sat by the window, light spilling across the table. For a long moment, silence. She studied me the way some people study art, calculating, searching for hidden flaws. Finally, she asked, "So, you actually listen to Miles Davis?" "Yes," I said, steady, "and Coltrane. And Ella, and birds." Her brow lifted. "Birds?" "I'm a bird watcher," I explained, bracing for ridicule. "I lead tours, teach people to notice beauty they ignore. A sparrow's flight, a heron lifting at dawn, it's music too, if you're willing to listen." Something flickered in her eyes then. Curiosity, recognition. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I glimpsed a softness beneath. "Not everything beautiful costs $1 million," she murmured, almost to herself. The words sank deep into me. She introduced herself. Isabel Grant. The name dropped like a weight in the room. I knew it, of course, who didn't? Billionaire. Magazine covers. Power broker. The kind of person so far removed from my world, we might as well have been born on different planets. Yet here she was, across the table from me, sipping black coffee, asking about nightingales. We talked longer than I expected. She confessed, carefully at first, about her empire-endless meetings, contracts, the suffocating cycle of power. Her words were precise, rehearsed. until she admitted, almost reluctantly, that sometimes silence in the boardroom felt like drowning. And me, I surprised myself with honesty. I told her about overdue rent, empty fridges, chores where clients tipped me in polite smiles instead of cash. About my mother's binoculars cracked, taped, the most precious thing I owned. I waited for her pity, her judgment. But instead, she leaned back, her gaze steady. "You've built a life around noticing things most of us never see," she said quietly. "That's rare." The warmth of her words startled me. By the time we left, night had fallen, street lamps painting golden pools on the sidewalk. At the corner, she pressed the Miles Davis vinyl into my hands. "Keep it," she said. "I can't. You can. Consider it an investment." "And what?" I asked, baffled. Her lips curved, the faintest suggestion of a smile. "And you." Before I could reply, she walked away, heels clicking against pavement, her figure dissolving into the city night. I stood there, clutching the record like it was a lifeline, my heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with jazz and everything to do with the woman who had just disappeared. When people ask me later how it all began, I don't say the antique shop or the vinyl. I say it began the morning Isabel Grant sat cross-legged on damp marsh grass, swatting mosquitoes like a child, and looked through my battered binoculars as if the world had cracked open to show her something new. The air that morning was cold, sharp enough to bite skin, carrying with it the earthy smell of wet reeds and brine. A fog had curled low to the ground, blurring the line between water and sky. She looked utterly misplaced there. Silk scarf, designer. Boots, posture so rigid it seemed her body was rebelling against the mud beneath her. And yet she was there. "Are you sure there are birds here?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Patience," I murmured. "Beauty doesn't announce itself. It waits." She frowned but accepted the binoculars. For a second, I thought she would mock me, but then her lips parted. "I see them." A flock of warblers sliced across the fog, wings catching the pale sun. Their calls were tiny sparks against the silence. Isabel lowered the binoculars as if afraid they might vanish if she moved too quickly. "They're small," she said softly. "They're alive," I countered. And that's the miracle. When she looked at me again, her storm gray eyes weren't sharp with challenge. They were wide, almost fragile. We sat there longer than I expected. Silence stretched between us, but not the kind weighted with awkwardness. It was the kind filled with possibility. Finally she spoke. "My father used to say silence meant weakness. Fill it before someone else does. But this—" she gestured toward the reeds, the mist, the rippling water. "This silence feels different. Like it's full of something I don't understand." Her words hit me harder than they should have. "Not weakness," I told her. "It's presence." For a moment, the corporate giant looked like a child trying to remember how to breathe. I wanted to touch her hand. One didn't. Afterward, I suggested coffee at a nearby diner. She hesitated, probably unused to grease-stained menus and chipped mugs, but she followed me inside. The waitress called me hun and poured our coffee without asking. Isabel stirred hers slowly, watching the swirl of cream as though it held secrets. "I don't remember the last time I did something without an agenda," she admitted. "Everything in my world is strategy. Every dinner, every meeting, it's all for gain. But this—" she gave a tiny shake of her head. "You didn't bring me here to sell me anything." "Maybe I should have," I joked. "Could have used the cash." Her eyes snapped up, sharp again. "You're struggling?" The bluntness of her tone made heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm fine." "Julia." My name on her lips carried authority. I wasn't used to resisting. "You're not fine," I bristled. "What would you know about it? You've never had to count coins at the register or hope a landlord forgets rent day." Her face tightened. "And you've never had every person in a boardroom waiting for you to fail so they can eat what's left of your empire." The table between us pulsed with the weight of unspoken truths. And then, as if realizing the edge in her voice, she leaned back, exhaling. "Maybe we're both fighting ghosts." Something in me softened at that. We parted outside the diner. I expected that to be the end. Another strange chapter in a book I never meant to start. But as I turned to go, her voice followed. "Come to my house." I froze. "Your house?" My estate, she corrected, almost absent-mindedly. I'd like to show you something. Every instinct screamed no. My life was messy enough, but then I remembered the way she had looked at the warblers, the softness in her voice when she said silence wasn't weakness. Against all better judgment, I nodded. The drive to her estate was like climbing into another dimension. City grit faded into winding coastal roads, the air sharpening with salt. And then suddenly it appeared. A fortress of glass and stone, perched on the edge of a cliff, as though daring the ocean to swallow it whole. Waves crashed against jagged rocks below, their roar echoing even from the driveway. I stepped out of the car, my breath stolen. The house loomed above me, cold, immaculate, terrifyingly beautiful. Inside, everything gleamed, marble floors polished to mirror shine. A chandelier spilling light like frozen rain. Hallways that seemed to stretch into infinity. I felt small, insignificant, like a sparrow in a palace. And then Isabel entered the space, and suddenly the house belonged to her in a way that made sense. "This is where I live," she said simply. "It looks more like where gods live," I muttered. Her lips curved faintly. "Sometimes it feels more like a cage." That evening, she insisted we eat together. Not in some grand dining hall, though she had one, but on the balcony overlooking the sea. The sky bled red into purple as waves hurled themselves at the cliff below. The table was set with silver cutlery and crystal glasses, but the food, grilled fish, fresh bread, roasted vegetables, was surprisingly simple. "Cook's off tonight," she said, catching my surprise. "I made this." "You cook?" Her brow lifted. "Why is that shocking?" "Because you look like you've never touched a frying pan in your life." She laughed, then a real laugh, unpolished and startlingly human. The sound warmed me more than the food. We talked long after the plates were empty, about jazz, about birds, about the strange weight of expectations neither of us had asked for. And then, just as the air grew heavy with a kind of silence that wasn't awkward but electric, she said it. "In my home," Isabel began, her tone deliberate, "there's one law, only one." I leaned forward, caught in the gravity of her voice. "What law?" She set her glass down, her gaze holding mine. "No clothes allowed." I blinked, laughed nervously. "That's funny." She didn't smile. The waves thundered below. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't break eye contact. "I'm not joking. I wear armor all day, suits, dresses, masks. This house is where I demand honesty, vulnerability. If you stay, Julia, you strip down literally and figuratively." My stomach nodded. "That's insane." Her expression didn't change. "Then leave." Silence slammed between us, thicker than the ocean air. Every rational thought screamed at me to run, to grab my bag, get back in my car, and never step into this world again. But beneath the fear was something more dangerous, a thrill. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about nakedness at all. Maybe it was about being seen, truly seen. I don't know why I agreed. But later that night, standing in the guest room, I peeled off layers of fabric until I stood bare, shivering not from cold, but from exposure. When I stepped into the hall, she was there, waiting. Not leering, not mocking. Simply watching me as though I were a painting she couldn't look away from. Her gaze softened. "You're beautiful, Julia." The words weren't casual. They weren't the empty flattery I'd heard before. They carried weight, sincerity, a rawness that left me trembling. For the first time in years, I believed them. And in that fragile, terrifying moment, I realized this was no game. Whatever Isabel Grant wanted from me, it wasn't just company. She wanted the one thing neither of us had ever truly given anyone else: honesty. Some people think love collapses with a bang, with screaming, shattered plates, slammed doors. Ours cracked with whispers, glances, and the quiet weight of pride. At first, the mansion felt like a dream. Isabel and I slipped into a strange rhythm. Coffee on the balcony, late-night jazz in the library, dinners that stretched into hours of laughter. She walked barefoot more often now, letting the ocean wind tangle her hair, and I found myself memorizing the way she looked when she forgot the world expected her to be still. But beneath it, tension brewed. It began with little things. One evening, she asked me to join her in the city. A gala, she said. Harmless. I hesitated. I don't have the clothes for that. I'll buy you something, she offered, casual, as though money solved everything. The words hit me wrong. I don't want your charity. Her brow arched. Charity? Julia, it's a dress. To you, it's just a dress, I snapped. To me, it's another reminder that you can buy the world and I can barely pay rent. The air went sharp. She set her glass down too carefully. You think my life costs nothing? That all this came without blood? Julia, every friend I have is a transaction. Every smile is a deal. And her voice trembled then, a rare crack. You're the only person I let in. And you call it charity? Her words landed heavy. I wanted to take mine back. But pride, stubborn, stupid pride clamped my mouth shut. The mansion's single rule began to feel heavier. Every night stripping down that bearing more than skin. And after that argument, it felt less like honesty and more like exposure. One night I couldn't do it. I shut the guest room door, pulled on my oldest jeans and sweater layers like armor. The fabric felt like a shield against the vulnerability. She demanded. When she saw me the next morning, her face went cold. You broke the rule. It's your house, Isabel, I said quietly. But it's my dignity. Her storm gray eyes sharpened into stone. Then maybe you don't belong here. The words sliced deep. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was wrong, that she terrified me because she saw too much. But instead, I grabbed my bag. Pride again, stronger than love. I walked out. The days that followed blurred. Cheap motel rooms, bird-watching tours that felt empty. Clients nodded politely, but all I saw was her face, her storm gray eyes. At night, the silence was unbearable. I found myself clutching the Miles Davis vinyl she'd given me, as if it were proof the connection hadn't been a dream. But the world doesn't leave billionaires alone. The headlines started. Isabel Grant's mysterious guest affair or scandal. Birdwatcher lover, heiress risking empire for romance. Paparazzi photos appeared, grainy shots of us leaving the diner, laughing on the balcony, walking barefoot through the marsh. My name was dragged through tabloids like mud. Clients canceled. My landlord threatened eviction. Loving her was costing me everything I had left. I didn't expect to see her again. But fate doesn't ask permission. It was a bright Saturday, and I was leading a small group through the city park, children craning their necks for sparrows, retirees clutching binoculars too heavy for their hands. And then I saw her, Isabel, surrounded by assistants, phone pressed to her ear, her presence as commanding as ever. She spotted me instantly. The world slowed. Her assistants tugged at her sleeve, urging her back to the car. But she didn't move. Instead, she walked straight toward me. The cameras followed. Strangers whispered. My group stared. She stopped in front of me, her eyes storm gray and burning. And then, without hesitation, she took my hand. I don't care about rules, she said, her voice ringing across the park. I don't care about pride. I care about you. The words silenced everything. Gasps rippled. Phones rose like a forest of eyes. And before I could breathe, she pulled me into her arms, holding me as though the entire world could crumble around us, and she wouldn't let go. It wasn't just a declaration, it was defiance. The fallout was immediate. By evening, the photos were everywhere, front pages, gossip blogs, news tickers. Billionaire heiress declares love in public. Scandalous kiss in the park. The board exploded with rage. Investors panicked. Talk shows debated whether she had lost her mind. But for Isabel, the noise faded. The only thing that mattered was that for once, she hadn't hidden. And for me, despite the fear, I couldn't shake the memory of her words. I care about you. 2 weeks later, the pressure reached its peak. Isabel was scheduled to attend a charity gala at event swarming, with cameras, journalists, and every influential figure in the city. She called me. For the first time since our separation, I answered. Come with me, she said. Not an order, not a plea. A simple request. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to protect myself. But something in her voice, steady yet trembling, made me say yes, The gala was held in a ballroom lit like a palace. Chandeliers glittered, champagne flowed, and the air buzzed with whispers. I wore the only dress I could afford, plain black, borrowed from a friend. Isabel walked beside me, flawless in midnight silk. The stares were knives, the whispers, poison. Halfway through, a man in a suit approached me, the same board member who had once hissed that I was a liability. His smile was cruel. "You're destroying her," he sneered. "She built this empire, and you, what are you? Nothing." The words hit like stones. My chest ached. I wanted to flee, but then Isabel appeared at my side, her hand slipping into mine. Her voice was clear, deliberate, carrying across the ballroom. "She's not nothing," Isabel said. "She's everything. She's the reason I remember why I started all this in the first place. Without her, none of it matters." Gasps rippled, cameras snapped. And then she turned to me, her storm gray eyes fierce and soft all at once, and she kissed me. Not a hidden kiss, not a polite peck. A kiss like firebowl, defiant, an inferno that scorched every expectation in the room. The ballroom erupted. Some cheered, some recoiled, some stormed out, but Isabel didn't care. For once, she wasn't performing for them. She was choosing. That night, away from the cameras, the fight came anyway. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I demanded, pacing her marble floor. "You've tied me to your empire. To them, I'll never be Julia again, I'll just be your scandal." Her voice cracked. "And do you know what it cost me to let you go?" "Julia, I've spent my life building walls so no one could hurt me. And you," she broke off, swallowing hard. "You're the only one who makes me want to tear them down. If that ruins me, so be it." Her hands shook when she reached for me. The woman who commanded empires trembled like a child afraid of the dark, and in that moment, my anger faltered. Because beneath the billionaire armor, beneath the storm gray stare, was a woman who just wanted to be loved. The next evening, she asked me to walk with her along the cliff. The sky bled orange and purple, gulls wheeling above the roaring ocean. She stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "I made that rule to protect myself," she admitted. "No clothes, no lies, but love isn't about rules, it's about risk. And I'm willing to risk everything if you are." From her pocket, she pulled out 2 simple silver bracelets. No diamonds, no gold. Just plain bands, engraved inside with words that made my chest ache. Not everything beautiful costs $1 million. My throat closed. Tears blurred the horizon. I slid the bracelet onto my wrist, my hand shaking. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, Isabel." She exhaled, relief breaking across her face like sunlight through storm clouds. And then she pulled me into her arms, and for the first time, it didn't feel like billionaire and birdwatcher, guest and host. It felt like equals. I thought that was the end of the story, the kiss, the bracelets, the promise whispered against. The sea. But love isn't just about declarations. It's about what comes after. And for us, the real test was learning to build a life together, 2 worlds colliding, reshaping, and discovering whether love could survive not just storms, but silence. They say the hardest part of love isn't the falling, it's the staying. And they're right. After the bracelets, after the kiss that burned through a ballroom of cameras, Isabel and I faced the real work. Mornings that weren't glamorous, choices that weren't romantic, and the ordinary days that stretched between. The sparks died at first, we stumbled. Her life ran on meetings, deadlines, and deals that stretched into midnight. Mine was built on silence, binoculars, and hours waiting for a rare bird to appear. I remember one evening, sitting alone on her balcony with my field journal, listening to the faint hum of her conference call through the glass. She'd promised. She'd join me to watch the pelicans at dusk. She didn't. The salt air stung my eyes more than the wind should have. Later she came out, exhaustion etched across her face. "I'm sorry. I wanted to forgive instantly. But truth demanded honesty. I don't want to be another meeting you reschedule." Her storm gray eyes softened. She sat beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "Then don't let me treat. You like one? Pull me back when I forget." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was real. And there were my flaws too. Pride still clung to me like shadow. Accepting her help, whether it was money, influence, or simple kindness, felt like surrender. One morning, after a long birding trip, I returned to find new equipment waiting in my room. A camera worth more than my yearly rent, lenses I only dreamed of. I froze. Isabel appeared in the doorway, tentative for once. "You deserve the best tools." The words should have warmed me. Instead, they burned. "I don't want to be your charity case." Her jaw tightened. "And I don't want to watch you sabotage yourself because you're too proud to accept love when it's offered." Silence fell. My chest ached. I wanted to hurl the camera into the sea. But later, alone, I held it in my hands and realized she wasn't buying my dignity. She was giving me a chance to see the world more clearly. The next day, I whispered a thank you. It wasn't easy. But her smile was worth it. Time reshaped us. We found ways to bridge our worlds. She joined me on dawn walks, trading stilettos. For sneakers, shivering as we waited for warblers. I sat in the back of her boardroom once, watching her dismantle a rival with nothing but calm precision. We laughed afterward about how both our jobs required patience. The difference was mine. Dealt with feathers, hers with sharks. We carved rituals, Friday nights for jazz, Sunday mornings for silence, midweek dinners where phones stayed face down, no matter how urgent the world claimed to be. Slowly, the mansion role faded. Not because it mattered less, but because we know. Longer needed it. Honesty had seeped into us naturally, skin or no skin. But storms don't vanish forever. 6 months in, the tabloid struck again. Julia Marks, gold digger or true love. Birdwatcher's lavish life on billionaires. They splashed my face across headlines, twisting every photo into proof I was leeching off her. My tours lost more clients. Birding clubs canceled contracts. To them, I wasn't an expert anymore. I was a scandal. I broke down one night, clutching the hateful clippings. "They've ruined me. Everything I built gone." Isabel's gaze was steady, her storm gray eyes anchoring me. "Then we build something new together." Her certainty steadied me more than any headline could. And so we did. With her backing and my knowledge, we launched a foundation one that funded conservation projects and offered free birdwatching programs for schools. My name wasn't buried anymore. It was written on every brochure, every press release, every classroom that discovered the joy of watching life take flight. For once, I wasn't just Isabel's guest. I was her partner. The turning point came one winter evening. We stood on the cliff outside her mansion, waves crashing below, stars sharp against the black sky. She held a small box in her hands, silver glinting in the moonlight. "I could give you diamonds," she said softly. "Emeralds, sapphires, anything you want, but that's not us." Inside the box lay 2 rings, simple silver, like our bracelets. Engraved inside were words that made my chest tighten. "Risk is the only rule worth keeping." She looked at me, the woman who once commanded empires with iron. Now, her voice trembled. "Julia Marks, will you build a life with me? Not as guest and host. Not as billionaire and birdwatcher, just as us." Tears stung hot. My voice barely worked. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The waves roared as though they, too, approved. We slid the rings onto each other's hands, silver catching starlight. And for the first time, I felt not like I'd stumbled into her world, but that we'd created one together. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale after that. There were still fights about schedules, about pride, about the weight of 2 very different worlds. There were days when her storm gray eyes felt distant, and nights when my stubbornness built. Walls she had to break down. But there was also laughter, warmth, and mornings when I woke to find her hair tangled against my shoulder, her breathing soft and even, and I knew, despite everything, that we were worth every storm. Years later, people still whisper about us. Some call it scandal. Some call it foolishness. Some call it a fairy tale. I call it truth. Because love, at its heart, isn't about rules or pride or what the world thinks. It's about finding someone who sees you stripped bare, flaws and all, and chooses you anyway. She was a billionaire. I was her guest. But now we're something richer than all of that. We're each other's home.